Over the last 25 years, I've had the privilege of interviewing and highlighting some truly interesting people. Everyone who is anyone, both the famous and the infamous, from presidents and their first ladies to kings and queens, movie stars and pop stars, captains of industry, heads of state, sports personalities, innovative entrepreneurs, and some pretty fascinating everyday people. Today, I'm proud to introduce you to Edward Jones, an expert in cybersecurity and emergency preparedness compliance software that has served as an industry standard for 3 decades. Mr. Jones, it's such a pleasure to meet you, especially in light of everything that is going on in our country and in our world today with cybersecurity. So let's start by talking about your background. Sir, you're the founder and CEO of a risk mitigation company with early experience in the federal government. So, how did you get to where you are today? Let's start right there.
I was trained at the University of Chicago and Washington University in St. Louis as an economist, and my first job was in the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, and I was there for 4 years, and I spent a lot of time working on large data sets and converting information into intelligence. And that's kind of a running theme throughout my entire career. I worked on very large, complex data sets, everything from international trade in silverware to automobile trade. This was in the early 70s, at the end of the Nixon era. And I went over to the Department of Justice the day President Ford was inaugurated and moved more into the policy realm from the intelligence realm. But again, working with large data sets on relating to criminal enterprise and to white collar crime and that type of thing. And after the Justice Department, I moved into consulting and did that for about 10 years, started a company called Medical Review Systems in the early 90s. And from that point on, 20 years, I have been in focusing on healthcare, trying to mitigate risks related to patients and their data.
So why don't you share with me what kinds of products and services your company actually offers?
Well, right now, we're taking advantage of the technology, smartphone, what's called SaaS, software as a service. And we're taking advantage of that to get out to workforces and to each workforce member the information they need to protect the information that patients have. It's called protected health information, and also to for emergency preparedness. And although it's been around for a long time, and I spent a lot of time working on disaster recovery in the 90s for large companies, it's only been in the last 2 years that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services have really required a whole host of healthcare providers to have these policies and procedures in place.
And let's dive a little deeper into those areas specifically. I'm a heart disease survivor, and so I've been in and out of medical facilities for the last 12 years, especially. So HIPAA safeguards are something that really are important to me and to numerous people around our country and around our world. But you have special expertise in both the HIPAA safeguards as well as emergency preparedness. So tell us a little bit about the breadth of your knowledge in these specific areas that impact on so many people, sir.
Well, I started in 93 working with what was then called the Work Group for Electronic Data Interchange. It was founded by the Health and Human Services Secretary Louis W. Sullivan, MD, in the 41 Bush administration. And the whole idea that he had come up with was to convert paper transactions in healthcare to electronic, because the costs were were rapidly rising and so forth. And that resulted in the HIPAA legislation in August of 1996, 17 pages in that large bill that focused on automating transactions, privacy, and security. The ironic thing about that legislation, they thought it could be fully in place in 3 years by the end of the 90s. And we're still struggling with a lot of that right now. The intersection of HIPAA safeguards and emergency preparedness is interesting because it pervades a lot of the healthcare realm that we wouldn't think of. But in the emergency preparedness rule, if there are evacuations during an emergency, and by the way, we're in a public health emergency because of the COVID-19 right now, but if there were an evacuation from a hospital or a long-term care facility, you would have to use the HIPAA rules to inform family members where their patient is going, and you have to use the HIPAA rules to make sure their medical record accompanies them.
I'm curious about the Electronic Healthcare Network Accreditation Commission, because clearly there are a lot of compliance issues that you want all these facilities to adhere to. So tell me a little bit about how you became involved with Electronic Healthcare Network Accreditation Commission.
That occurred back in the early 90s, and I was a part of a group of, there were about 20 of us who spent 18 months. We met every month with a facilitator of accreditation, just like a university would be accredited. And we ended up accrediting the security and privacy and transaction standards, mainly for healthcare clearinghouses. When we converted from paper to electronic, we had to have a standardized form, just like you go out and if you're transacting with your bank using your computer, using what are called structured data elements. We had to come up with those rules, and we did. And we found out what drove that particular business was marketing. If you had accreditation, people had confidence that the information you were transacting was accurate. About 10% of all claims that go out have some sort of human data element error involved. For example, if my name is Edward Jones on a healthcare claim with a doctor and he submits Ed Jones, it's going to be kicked out because those data have to be exactly match between recipient and sender. So the commission has been around now for 25 years. It's grown into other areas of banking, all sorts of transactions. They annually come up with public review of new accreditation criteria. Some states, for example, New Jersey, requires you to be accredited by ENAC in order to transact business in the state, and there's several others as well.
You know, I'm going to be practical for just a moment because I know people watching this, they start asking themselves, how can I benefit from this? So what would you tell a client looking to increase the security of their own business operations?
Well, the first thing you have to do is do a risk assessment. You've got to know what your exposures are, and those are both man-made. For example, most of the breaches that occur in healthcare, and more breaches occur in healthcare than any other industry sector, you have to be able to train your workforce to be able to recognize what is a real transaction. It's called phishing with email. You may get an email. If you open it up, it sets out malware in your networks or in your systems. The other, the big thing at the moment is ransomware, where they try and make hostage your data files. So you need to have backups of backups of backups. and make sure that you can operate, because you're dealing with people's lives and their health and safety. So that is the critical element. Training and reminders are imperative, and we have we've had HIPAA's been in around for security since '05 and privacy since '03. And we haven't had the enforcement that we have with emergency preparedness. Emergency preparedness is driven by Medicare and Medicaid, and they have to certify annually that they're in compliance. And now, to be fair, the Office for Civil Rights of the Department of Health and Human Services has beefed up enforcement in the last couple of years with these breaches. In fact, there was a case, I think it was released last week, a $5.1 million settlement on a large breach, but it doesn't have the systematic enforcement built in as emergency preparedness does.
I know that this work has just been your life's work, but every one of us has some people behind us that allow us to do our work and live out our passion. So why don't you talk to me a little bit about how your family has helped you and played a role in your obvious success?
Well, I've written 10 books, and I wanted to include all of my family in the dedication section of those books. But I keep getting grandchildren, so I keep, they motivate me to keep writing.
That's a good thing. Grandchildren are always a good thing.
They're wonderful. And mine range, I have 8 ranging 28 years to 11 months. And I haven't seen the 11th month old yet, but I have hundreds of pictures of him. So family is absolutely critical. They allowed me, my late wife, who passed in 2011, allowed me the time to write books. And that's not a lonely, but it's a single enterprise requiring a lot of mental activity. And I always had a problem trying to explain HIPAA to her. So once she understood it, I knew if I could translate that in the book, those same messages, then I knew I had it right.
Mr. Jones, thank you so very much for just breaking that down for us. Notwithstanding that beautiful family that you and your late wife built, what would you say has been your greatest accomplishment to date?
My greatest accomplishment actually is in a totally separate area. I was in Washington, D.C. I had a 5-year-old daughter, and we moved to Capitol Hill, and I needed a school for her to go to. And I went to one of the parent-teacher meetings, and that first meeting they talked about, it was on 2 church campuses across Capitol Hill. They talked about creating a unified campus. And 8 years later, when I was the chairman of the board, and we ended up creating Capitol Hill Day School, which is in its, I think they just had their 50th year. And all those kids who benefited by that education, that a whole team of us, I just ended up as a foot soldier to begin with, and then the leader of the board at the end. But it was a whole team of people who made that come to pass. And I get the annual report every year, and I just marvel where these kids are going to school and what they've accomplished. My 2 daughters went there, and my oldest daughter teaches special education, so she's, I think some of that rubbed off on her. And then my youngest daughter went to Duke, found her husband there, and they've been very successful as well. So family is everything to me, whether it's my family or the family that we're helping with the work that we do. I look at that 11-month-old grandson who is up in New York, and the wonders that he's going to have ahead of him it just keeps you going. It's inspiring.
Absolutely. I can share with you that I used to think my law degree was my greatest asset, and I came to realize my health is absolutely my greatest asset, and protecting that health and that healthcare privacy is goes hand in hand. And so I'd like to thank you for your service. Thank you for the products and services that you provided to our community. And thank you for the reminder of what's important to all of us. Thank you again for your conversation today.
I appreciate it, enjoyed it. Thank you.